Hey guys, welcome back. Today we are finally covering a topic that people have been requesting for, like over a year now I think, and that is which parasite would win in a 1v1 battle for the ages. Halo's iconic Flood, or Dead Space's horrifyingly well-known Necromorphs. So the reason that I never made this video was honestly because I know next to nothing about Dead Space lore, and I don't just want to sit here for 10 minutes talking about something that I know jack shit about. However, to fix this little issue, I've partnered up with my boy Roanoke Gaming, who's going to cover the Dead Space half of this video. Now, the dude does some excellent videos about Halo lore, Titanfall lore, Dead Space lore, and many other sci-fi games, so definitely go and check his channel out, the link is in the description. So, without any further ado, let's start off with the Flood side of things. The origins of the Flood are interesting, to say the least. To summarise very briefly, over 10 million years prior to Master Chief, the Halo universe was a very, very different place. The universe was dominated by 4 primary species: the Ancient Prophets, Ancient Humans, Forerunners, and also a God species, responsible for creating all life in existence, the Precursors. Because of their power, the Precursors held something called the Mantle of Responsibility, which essentially made them the Guardians of the Galaxy. They kept the universe relatively peaceful using this power, until the time came for them to choose a species to pass the mantle down onto. Now, ancient humanity and the Forerunners were of roughly equal power, and when the Precursors chose to pass the mantle down to humanity, the Forerunners weren't exactly happy, to say the least. Fueled by anger and betrayal, Forerunner warrior servants revolted against their creators, taking them by surprise. They began to relentlessly slaughter the Precursors, who chose not to retaliate, partly down to their shock that their creations were capable of such a thing. The Forerunners went on to eradicate what they thought was the entire species. However, some Precursors did manage to escape. They ground themselves down into a fine powder, which they could then use years later to reform into their previous selves. And then, about 9 million years passed, and the same 3 species were still around. During ancient humanity's expansion among the stars, they came across some crashed cargo ships on colonies, of which had no crew or no bodies on board, only vials of a fine powder. Now, after many tests that they ran, the powder was deemed harmless and seemingly useless, and the humans and prophets ended up feeding this powder to these dog-like creatures that they kept as pets called the Faru, because it somehow caused positive effects in them. However, over time, the Faru began to grow fleshy tentacles. They turned violent and eventually began to cannibalize each other. These mysterious symptoms then began to spread to those who kept the Faru as pets, and they too began to get extremely violent and grow these fleshy tentacles. If you haven't already guessed, the powder that they'd been feeding the Faru was the ground down remains of the Precursors that over the years had corrupted into the Flood. From here, the parasite spread throughout the galaxy, leading to the destruction of the Ancient Prophet, Human, and Forerunner empires, proving it was a true force to be reckoned with. And that is a very brief summary of the origins of the Flood, so now that we have that nailed down, let's look at how the Flood actually infects. So the entire basis of the Flood infection is an undifferentiated cell type referred to as the Flood supercell. This one cell might be one of the most dangerous things in the entire Halo universe because it's literally all you need inside you to become infected. Because the supercell is found in every single Flood form, that means that every single Flood form can pass on the infection. Flood spores do it by being inhaled by the host, infection forms do it by sticking their tendrils into the spinal cord, gaining control of the nervous system, and then releasing these supercells into the body, and combat forms do it by practically any transfer of cells to another person. However, the most common method seems to be biting. We can also assume by this that pure forms like the Tank are also capable of doing the same. Now, this makes the Flood sound extremely lethal, and although they are, like 99% of the time, at the beginning of an outbreak, they aren't exactly that uncontrollable. So the way that a Flood outbreak progresses is by evolving through 4 specific stages, each requiring certain prerequisites, and each making the parasite far deadlier in a number of ways. The first stage is known as the feral stage and begins right at the start of an outbreak. During this stage, the flood forms are relatively disorganized because they have no centralized intelligence controlling them. They're literally just a bunch of individual forms. The goal in this stage, however, is to accumulate enough biomass for the flood to construct a proto-gravemind, a form of centralized intelligence that, when built, makes the flood far more tactical, strategic, and lethal. But it doesn't stop there. To continue on to the next stage, the flood then have to use this new strategical strength to continue gathering biomass, which is then used to evolve the proto-gravemind into a regular, sentient gravemind. At this point, the flood enters the coordinator stage, allowing for the creation of flood pure forms, including the rarer forms like juggernauts too. Flood supercells can also generate hives, which release spores into the atmosphere, which effectively turns the flood infection airborne, which is a truly terrifying thought. The Gravemind, using the power of precursor neural physics, regains all of the knowledge and intelligence of the previous Graveminds, dating way back to the origins of the Flood. Now, precursor neural physics are extremely complicated. Basically, it's the idea that everything that exists is living, but in a way that kind of mixes science and extreme philosophy. It's really, really weird and hard to understand, but basically that's all you need to know. Using their increasing tactical abilities, the Flood continue to spread and gather biomass to increase the Flood's overall size and intelligence. The third stage is then called the Interstellar stage, which begins when the Flood gain access to space travel, but also involves the infection of an entire planet, including all of its technology, which leads to the creation of a Keymind, a planet-sized Gravemind. At this stage, the Flood is a galactic tier threat, and are also able to manipulate neural physics thanks to their heightened intelligence, which, considering neural physics are quite literally woven into the very fabric of existence, makes the Flood an unimaginable threat. This then leads to the fourth stage, the transgalactic stage, which is without a doubt the most terrifying of all. It occurs when the Flood have consumed all biomatter, information, and technology in an entire galaxy, and have to spread to another galaxy and then repeat the 4 stages to continue growing. At this point, total victory for the Flood is all but assured, and given their strength, the galaxies that they choose to spread to will likely fall to the parasite terrifyingly quickly. So this all sounds absolutely fucking terrifying, so how do we stop it? Well, there's 2 relatively efficient ways to stop the Flood, the first of which is fire. So, because Flood forms are composed purely of rotting biomatter, they're really weak to any form of extreme heat, be it an energy beam like the weaponry the Foreigners used against them, or raw fire like the humans used. Any source of extreme heat that can burn away the rotten flesh is gonna work pretty damn well, but only on a small scale. For similar reasons, shotguns work well too, because the large number of pellets they fire effectively eviscerates the rotten flesh, but again, this is really only a small-scale solution. This does feed into the second method though, which is more suited for large-scale quarantine: destroying the nervous system. Flood forms require nervous systems to work, and what's the one galaxy-wide super weapon that targets the nervous system? Why, the Halos, of course. They really are the only way to eradicate any large-scale Flood outbreak, but they do, of course, come at the cost of literally billions of innocent lives, so before you fire a Halo ring to stop the Flood, at least make sure you do some cost-benefit analysis first. So, now that we've covered the Flood's history, strengths, and weaknesses, we can try and answer the million-dollar question, whether they'd best the Necromorphs in a 1v1. So if you want to hear the raw details about the Necromorphs, like their strengths and weaknesses and their history, etc., then go and check out Roanoke's part of the video where he covers all of that in beautiful detail. Just hit that little eye in the top right-hand corner of the video that should be there right now. Alrighty, so who's the victor? Well, honestly, it depends which stage of evolution the Flood are in when they encounter the Necromorphs. If they're in the feral stage, chances are the Necromorphs would win by quite a large amount. During this stage, the Flood really aren't that intelligent, which would be a major weakness because of how the Necromorphs are created. So they use something called a red marker, which causes a signal to be emitted, which sends hosts insane, which then leads to their deaths, and after this, the DNA in their dead flesh is then used to reanimate them as Necromorphs. However, if a person is intelligent enough, they're able to resist this effect, but sadly the Flood aren't yet. That said, however, towards the end of the feral stage, when a proto-gravemind is formed, they might start to get a little bit more resistant, but when an actual Gravemind is formed, given their insane intelligence and millennia upon millennia of knowledge, I feel like they'd become near immune to it. If not with a regular Gravemind, then absolutely with a Keymind during the Interstellar stage, and without a doubt with multiple Keyminds during the Transgalactic stage. At this point, not only are the Flood hyper-intelligent, they're also capable of using the galaxy's most powerful superweapons, like tactical nukes and other weapons of mass destruction to combat the elusive Brethren moons. All in all though, I'd say that about 75% of the time, the Flood would reign victorious as the superior parasite. That said though, if the Flood were caught off guard by Necromorphs, or god forbid a Brethren moon during the Feral stage, they would be royally fucked. Therefore, I'm happy to say that the overall victor in the parasitic Battle of the Ages is the iconic Flood. You really wouldn't have it any other way. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope that you agreed with my conclusion. If not, then let me know in the comments. I want to thank Roanoke for helping out with the Deadspace part of this video, because, legit, if it wasn't for him, then this video would not have been possible, so definitely go check his channel out. Also, I want to give a big thank you to my boys over on Patreon for the big support: Ardent, Tomahawk, Taylor, Evan, Momo, Shikata, Foxy, Mjolnir, Matthew, Pierre, Manu, Toni, Ben, Jim, Regan, Jack Madden, Eric Brown, Sam Grafton, and Bruin98. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll catch you in the next one.